Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and we have a very special guest with us today. Dan Fachner is the president and CEO of J&J Snack Foods. Now, I have to admit something right up front, that I am a J&J Snack Foods super fan, because one of the products they make is super pretzels. I'll probably tell some stories. Well, I'll tell it real quickly. First of all, let me greet Dan. Dan, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here today.
Okay, Dan, normally I don't do this, but I just got to tell this story. I've told Dan this a couple of times. His predecessor as president, this is like over 25 years ago. I couldn't find super pretzels in the supermarket. You heat them up, you put a little salt on them. They're like my favorite food. And I literally called his predecessor, and he picked up the phone, said, we'll have them all over Houston in 3 days, and sent me some coupons. So I have been a super fan of the company ever since. So for this president of a big public company to pick up a phone for a then 20-something one customer of 100 million, already a generous business owner. So you're going to learn today that Dan has continued that tradition. And so, Dan, we always start out, let's just hear your story. Tell us about where you grew up, what your family was like, that kind of stuff. Were you running a lemonade stand? What was going on with Dan as a kid?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for giving me that intro. Also, I just want to say, Jerry Schreiber, who was the founder and my predecessor, right, who stepped down about 4 or 5 years ago, he was a generous man, right? Yeah. And the story you told does not surprise me at all. Those are the kind of things. He was a great mentor for me for a lot of years, and caring for people and customers is exactly what he taught me. Right. And so the story you tell, I got to believe it's probably not the only story like that.
I'm sure there's 100 of them.
A lot with
but what it creates, I mean, I learned from that. Like there's no small interaction,
right?
And just these small ways we behave of generosity, frankly, create a culture, but also create super fans for your business,
It does. And enjoying the job and enjoying the people that enjoy your products, right? It's such a great lesson for all of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so where did you grow up?
Yeah, thanks. I grew up in Northern California, a little town called Lodi. You might know it from the old Creedence Clearwater song, Stuck in Lodi. Okay. I grew up in that. It's the part of California that not everybody knows about. It's the farm country, It's not what you typically think of being on the beach and or being in the mountains. This is flat land, and it's either dairy farms or grape vineyards, right?
You may play volleyball, but it's not on sand. Okay.
It's exactly right. It's because you cut a little space out of the vineyard somewhere.
Yeah. It's a family picnic. Got it.
Right, which is really what I did growing up. At about an age of about 8 or 9 years old, the farmers would pay you per vine if you pruned the vines during the fall time, or if you picked the grapes by vine, they would pay you for that. And that's really kind of how I learned a little bit of my work ethic growing up. Love that part of the country, miss it. My family still lives there. I'm now in Tennessee, and I love living in Tennessee, but it's a really great part of the country. I was fortunate. I grew up there, had really tremendous parents. When they passed away a few years back, at both of their funerals, I was able to say I was one of the lucky ones. My mom and dad taught me how to love people and to love God. And I'm really grateful for that. It's a good upbringing, and I still have family there. Both me and my wife's family are there.
How many siblings do you have?
I have 3 other siblings. I have 2 sisters and an older brother. Okay. And they're still all in that
Everybody's
general
there.
Area. Everybody's there. Yeah. One's in Sacramento, but I consider that the same area. So.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, it's a beautiful area.
Where do you go off to school?
I'm right there in Stockton.
Okay.
Right. So Lodi is almost connected to Stockton. And I went to school right there in Stockton. After high school, played a little bit of football. and played it right there in Stockton, California.
Love it. Okay. And now what did you get? What did you study in college?
Business. Yeah.
You did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you get
Although
out.
I had this great dream though, when I was in high school of being something within like a veterinarian field, something
Okay.
along that lines. Had an opportunity to go to UC Davis, and that's a great veterinarian school, and it just wasn't where I wanted to play football at, because I think I was more intent on playing football than
Yeah.
studying at that period of time in my life.
Yep.
But I did study business. Yeah.
Okay. So you do business and you get out, and it's not specific, right? Wasn't accounting necessarily, where maybe you go to a public accounting firm or whatever else. So that's a pretty wide field. How did you land the first job?
Yeah, well, the story's kind of crazy. So I'm in the middle of college and I'm playing football, and I get an opportunity because my dad works for a trade school, Universal Technical Institute. I get the opportunity in between football seasons. You remember I'm saying in between football seasons,
Right.
not in between semesters, right? So you know where my head's focused.
Where your priorities were, yes.
Yeah. So in between football seasons, to do this 9-month course where I could learn heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration. So I go off to Arizona and do this 9-month course, and everybody's saying, what are you doing? You're not a mechanic. What are you doing this for? And I'm thinking, hey, this is a great thing to get under my belt and understand for the rest of my life, right? And I'm still a young man, and I can come back and get right into school. So I come back to Lodi, and I've graduated from this technical school, and it's summer, and these were the periods of time in our life that you worked during the summer. You didn't get summers off, right? Especially at my household. Dad was pushing you out the door to do something. So I got a job with a little company called Western Icy. And I started off in this company as a service technician and a route driver, which meant that we were delivering products back in 1980.
Okay, now hold on. Did your getting that job have anything to do with the fact that you knew something about refrigeration? Like, did you connect the dots to that, or is that just a pure coincidence?
Well, no, this had something to do with refrigeration, because an icy machine has almost a little like refrigerator.
It's a little air conditioner.
Right. It is a little air
machine.
Conditioning. Right. Yeah. And so got this job for the summer, and I've never looked back. I've been with the company now for 45 years. I have gone back and finished my degree, but I never looked back from that time. So 1979, 1980, I'm out there servicing equipment and delivering products.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, all right, describe I think everybody knows, and obviously we'll get to this transition from Icy to J&J Snack Foods, which is, just a bigger job with more products. I mean, essentially, but okay, take us through this. So you're these machines, I mean, like, you remember how many at the time? This is a division, and then that company was like regional and became national. Maybe just take us through. I know we could do a whole podcast on that, but maybe a few minutes on just the expansion of that business. And
you can. I'll condense that first. Just for the listeners, we're talking about Icy, the frozen beverage drink.
Exactly.
That you best know by the.
We can kind of see it
cup
behind you a little bit on YouTube.
It's right
if you're looking
here.
on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, red and blue cup. It's stacks above it, and you used to buy it in the old days at Kmart, right, or 7-Eleven, or as it began originally in 7-Eleven, and then Kmart, and then the mass merchandisers, Walmart, and then the theaters, and really almost everywhere that you go today in food. But when I started, it was really divisional. It was individually owned by about 40 different people across the country. The product was invented. It was sold to a manufacturer who made the machine. The manufacturer sold rights to the Icy brand across the country, and then went bankrupt. And so then it was owned by about 40 different small little companies. And we were just one of those small little companies, maybe in terms of size, I'll use dollars in terms of size, maybe $1 million annual sales.
Wow.
Company that I originally started. And it was really just California at that time and Houston, those two areas that we owned. Yeah. And then, I kind of grew up in the business. I became a service manager, then an operations manager, then a district manager, then a sales manager, then a vice president, then a vice president of operations, then a GM. I kind of got a chance to do everything inside the organization. Became CEO and president in 1997. And over the years, we continued to buy up all the other different IC developers. I went out to Michigan in about 1990. We had bought a big company out there that serviced the Midwest, and then ended up buying all the rest of the developers along the way until we put this one big IC company together. Yeah.
Okay. So that had to be a big deal because it was kind of centrally owned, goes bankrupt, kind of gets fragmented, but then you had to kind of put that's not an easy thing to tell us maybe a little bit, because some of the stuff we like to tell on this podcast are the setbacks. You know what I mean? There had to be some setbacks along the way. If you don't mind sharing, maybe a challenge, maybe it was putting that business together or some other setback along the way. What are some of the lessons along the way?
We had a lot of setbacks. Number one, to go where we wanted to go with this brand, we knew that we had to own it nationwide, because the individual owners, some of them didn't want to deal with a customer like a Kmart, right? Hey, I do business with convenience stores, like the guy in Louisiana who was very, very successful at IC, but his niche was doing it in convenience stores. He didn't want to have anything to do with what we called at that time a mass merchandiser.
Right.
And so we couldn't go sell our brand to big customers and our product to big customers because we didn't own it nationwide, and we couldn't get everybody to agree upon that, right? And we talked about the original founder and how generous he was in a lot of ways, and yet he also had that other side of him, right? And so he had a way of kind of rubbing some of those guys wrong, because his way of kind of having an opportunity to buy him was for me to go out and compete with them until they finally said uncle. And sometimes that works, but oftentimes that doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
And so those were challenges in the early years to try to get the organization, this great brand that we had with a tremendous product, all put together so that then we could go call on national accounts like AMC Theaters or Regal Theaters, some of the really big ones, Sam's Clubs out there, to be able to offer them a program nationwide. But we went through some real challenges in the early years. Also with the IC business, you think about that machine, you typically loan that machine and you put it on location. Those machines are expensive. They're 10,000 plus per machine. So when you put it on location, you better be pretty sure that they're going to do enough volume to get that payback. And it takes a couple of years to get a payback, right? And so learning what the right accounts were and what the right accounts weren't, right, was a real challenge along the way.
Yeah. So what year is it that IC became part of J&J?
Yeah, in 1987, J&J bought that Western IC Corporation. That's the one that I was working for.
Your unit.
We were a unit. We weren't a big unit. I think we were about $3 million in sales at that time. And J&J bought that. J&J, as you talked about earlier, was most known for the big soft pretzel, right? We'll talk at some time about all the different products we make today. But they were most known for the big soft pretzel, and they were kind of doing the same thing that IC was doing. They were going out there and buying every soft pretzel manufacturer around the country to kind of consolidate it to be one big one. Jerry Schreiber, the founder, who sent you these coupons, right? Knew of IC because of Kmart. Remember, if you go back to those years, Kmart was a big customer, and they were opening up, 10 stores a week at that time, right? As they were growing like crazy. And he knew of IC because both IC and pretzels were sold.
Machines are next to each other.
Yeah, they were right.
I mean,
right.
I'll take an IC and a pretzel.
Right. So he started kind of getting interested in it and knew how he could maybe pull that together. He bought the little company out west. I got a chance to know him kind of early on once he bought it. I'm a pretty young man at that time, and I'm working up in Northern California. Our corporate office is in Southern California. And he has asked us to do something that maybe for a lot of us might feel questionable, right? And he wanted me to have one of my guys do that. We actually wanted to pull a machine out of a customer's location that wasn't ours, just to aggravate the competition, right? And so he asked me to do that with one of our guys that worked for us, and I said, we'll do that, right? But I wasn't going to send our guy out alone. And so the next morning I showed up in coveralls over the top of my, at that time you wore a tie, over the top of my tie, and I went in and did it for him.
Wow.
And then Jerry Schreiber happened to be in the parking lot as we were moving the machine out and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm doing exactly what you asked me to do, but I'm not asking somebody else to do that." Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
A good story, and that's how I really got to know him, and that impressed him in a way that soon he asked me to come down and be vice president of operations at a really young age. You know, we were still small, but still, I'm 27 years old, and I'm vice president of operations for the IC company at that time.
Okay. Now, this is really helpful to me to get this context of your career because we met when you were kind of giving this presentation where now, now it's a larger public company that you're running. And I think sometimes, we've had these conversations about in public companies, we're talking about the Generous Business Owner podcast. So it's like, how do you use your platform for generosity? And there's many forms of that. And I think a lot of people who run public companies are a little scared maybe to talk about this topic because maybe faith gets involved or whatever. And, we can't proselytize and all those things. But what this sort of explains to me, Dan, and I'm sure you've put this together, but it's just sort of come together as we're having this conversation for me, is that you really came from a small business.
I did. Yeah,
you
I
came
really
from
did.
where you take care of the customer, you do things. And I was like, when I heard you kind of talk about the way you lead what I consider to be, a larger public company now, you kind of do it in a way that reminds me of these smaller, you know what I mean? Family run almost, like where you take care of people and that kind of thing. And so maybe take us up to the present day a little bit of, okay, the business now, maybe what the products are and all that. And then let's kind of get into the approach, where you're treating people, you've got these values that you're celebrating and that sort of thing. So anyway, run us up to the present day, and then let's talk a little more about the business now.
Yeah, I would love to do that. And, just to kind of touch on what you said already,
Yeah.
anyhow, I really do believe in servant leadership and
Yeah.
taking care of the people that work for you. And as you do that, they take care of the organization,
Exactly.
right? You take care of the people, they take care of the organization, and everybody feels good about it. So even that incident that, may or may not have been questionable, I just wasn't comfortable to have one of my guys do that, and I was happy to do it with him, right?
Right.
To just good about that. Since that time, just to kind of take off from there, since that time, I was CEO and president of IC up until about 4 or 5 years ago. I think just at about 5-year mark.
Yeah.
And we hit COVID, right? And
right.
IC had grown to a nice size, over 300 million, and we'd become nationwide and international in a lot of different places and continuing to grow. We hit COVID, and the founder was getting to that point where it was time for him to step down.
Yeah.
Right. And he was trying to find the right person. I get a call from the board who said, would you be interested? I had moved our company, IC, from California to Tennessee, which is where I'm at now. It was just better centrally located to where the real business was.
Yeah.
And moved to Tennessee. And I get the call from the board that said, is this something that you'd be interested in? And I had talked to him a couple other times, and I said, when the right time comes, I'll be interested, right? And this just felt like the right time. Yeah. And so I had the opportunity to come in and become CEO of J&J Snack Foods. J&J is a publicly traded company. In terms of annual sales today, we're about $1.6 billion, just shy of this last year, with about 4,500 employees, 17 different manufacturing plants. And do business across the country with some of the greatest brands. For the size of our company, to have a brand like IC or Dippin' Dots or Luigi's Italian Ice or Philly Swirl or Super Pretzel, or just kind of the list goes on and on and on. And am fortunate enough to be able to lead that company today with some really, really good people alongside me.
I mean, I don't know many people in your position who, most people that are, I think, in your job, and maybe this is generalization, maybe I don't have the stats on this, but this is just from my observation. Of course, we, run a wealth management company, so we invest in public companies and that sort of thing. So I have a pretty good look at it. But most people running large public companies kind of came through, they went to business school, got a management job and sort of moved their way up the management track, starting at large companies and finishing at large companies. You are I find this fascinating where you came from the grassroots, man, like literally learned how to keep a machine working that was cold and all the way up to, I mean, it's actually a really awesome success story of just, sticking to it and those things. But again, the thing that I just can't get out of my brain is the way that you operate now. I bet it's not that different than the way you were when you were just operating icy as a private company. I mean, what's your kind of management philosophy, if you will? And you've talked a little about with servant leadership, but what are some of the ways that you still try to take care of people, even as the numbers grow, revenue?
Yeah, well, people matter, number one,
Yes.
right? And we just had a sales meeting just a month ago, and I'm up on stage talking about how much people matter, right? If you take care of the people take care of your organization. And we talked a little bit about this early on, but taking care of people no matter what their job is. I say this all the time when I'm out in our plants or in a group of our employees. But we all are on the same team. We're all playing on the same team. We all play different positions, and just like a football team, if the guard does his job well, and the quarterback does his job well, and the wide receiver does his job well, we win as a team. And they expect me to be good when I'm on an investor call, and at the end of the quarter, whether we've had a good quarter or a bad quarter, and I'm on that call and they're listening in because we encourage them to, they expect me to be good. They don't expect me to say, boy, I don't know. I really think about our business that way. They expect me to be good, and I expect them to be good at the job that they do. And people really matter. My philosophy is that people matter so much that you have to care about each and every one in the job that they do. And as you do that, you get some great success across the organization. That probably is some of my faith bringing as well. I grew up that way. My parents taught me that. I've gone to church from the time that I was young enough to realize I'm going to church, right? At some point, you have to have your own walk there and develop that. And even met my wife at a church camp along the way. And it's just our philosophy. And you're right. I still try to run it like it's a small company. And there's even times that I get angry at us for having too much bureaucracy.
Right? Sure.
I like to keep it, as shallow as we possibly can be, so that we know the folks out there and they know us, and that we're close to the business.
Now, so as you grow, of course, you can't touch everybody every day, okay? And so you have to build an organization, which I'm sure is, like you've said, try to keep lean, but just by the pure scale of it, you've got to have some systems. So, like I was following just even your posts on LinkedIn and that kind of thing. And the first thing that jumped out at me is your celebration of people. Like that comes through with the things you're doing, celebrating even people when they leave the company, running through a tunnel of high fives, or like your 7 values were listed and you had people named, celebrate. Maybe talk about, because I know there's people listening to this on the treadmill or whatever that are like, okay, well, how do I, implement that? Okay, I believe people matter, but how do I build a culture at my company, maybe with some systems that do that? Because can you just share some of the things you guys do to try to ensure that it's not just coming from you, but from the business at large?
Yeah, we work really hard at that. And culture is a number one thing.
Exactly.
You've heard it said a bunch of times that culture, eats strategy for breakfast.
Exactly.
And I've been on stage saying, I believe that.
Yeah.
However, culture and good strategy is the winning combination. So, to have
if you
one
got both,
if you got both, you can win, right? And so as I took on the new role, I developed this philosophy of the 5 strategies that I want our organization to really understand, and then 7 principles that I want us to live by. And we call it the 7 C's. And so we have now posted those 7 C's in each one of our plants, in each one of our service centers. In fact, even printed it out on what would be like a small business card and handed that out to everybody in the organization, and encouraged people to have it in their wallet, in their purse, on their body, on their desk if they have a desk job. And we talk about it all the time. And I talked about our sales meetings. So at our sales meetings now, we celebrate the 7 C's. We will have a 7 C's winner for each one of those things. And I'll just rattle them off real quick.
Yeah, please.
It's culture, it's collaboration, it's communication, it's consistency, contagious energy, coaching, and character. Each one of them extremely important to the right kind of culture as an organization. So I'll give out a 7 C's award winner for that. And then they become kind of what we call the President's Council for that year. And we celebrate those people in some really big ways, and spend some time with them during the sales meeting separately, and then just try to continue to drive that philosophy home. It takes really good people around you. It takes everybody buying into it, and it takes a commitment to getting that through your system. But you can do it. People talk about it all the time now. 7 C's is just one of those things that we talk about a lot.
So it sounds like an annual award, and then you
Yes.
create a council, and then I'm sure, they are spreaders for the next year of maybe in those areas, right? That they were
the more you celebrate them, the more others are interested in being one of those, right? The more you reward those kinds of great behaviors, and the way that we award them is we get to this annual meeting, and we ask all the leadership to submit folks that they have within their organization that they think fits one of these 7 C's. And so we do that, and then we kind of sift through each one of those, including me. I don't believe that's a job too small for me, so I'll read those on the weekends at nights, and kind of get an idea of who I think really is that right person. Yeah, and then I award them from stage myself.
I love it. The thing that I think is so cool is, it's one thing to, believe that people matter. Okay. Right. Your sort of mantra. And, you came up with small business. Okay. You can believe it. And that's helpful. I mean, some of that'll like seep into your lieutenants and the culture. But the fact that you have, and frankly, it's not that complicated. That's what I like about it. I actually think somebody with a business with, 40 employees can do the same general idea, like come up with your principles or your values, give an award to people that live them out, and create a little special experience so they become leaders of that. I think you can do that with 45 or 4,500 employees, right?
You can align that with your strategies in which you want to drive your business forward. Put those two things together, and then reward people for them so that they understand that and they want to accomplish that.
Yeah, and I think, we were talking before we started recording today about this idea of generosity takes many forms. I think sometimes when we hear that word, we think money. Right. And yeah, of course, you should pay people well and motivate them and incent them and all of those things. But it's also just the way you treat people, Yeah,
without a doubt. I talk about that a lot in our circles, and how we treat people, and then try to live that out. You talk about coming from a small company and knowing those people. If there's something that I grieve every now and then, is that I don't know every 4,500 one of those. Yeah. But I will do this. If you're walking around and you watch my LinkedIn posts, you'll see me taking pictures with the guys out on the field. I'll stop and talk to, the person on the line. I'll stop and talk to the service technician. I want to know what makes them tick. I want to know if we're doing good things for them, and how we can get better as an organization. And then often I'll take a quick selfie with them just to kind of to share that moment, and it's so important. I can't tell you how many times that I hear that over and over. I'll send a Christmas card to everybody in the organization. I'm one of those people who will handwrite cards and still send it out for things that I hear that things that are done well. It's not complicated, right? But the more people feel connected, you do have to be competitive in what you pay, and you have to be competitive in the benefit packages that you have. But more so than anything, people want to feel like they're needed and wanted in this organization and appreciated. And there's a lot of little things that you can do to show that appreciation for people, that generosity of giving back to them, like you expected when you were coming up the ladder.
Well, and we started this with a story of just one customer having an amazing sort of experience, if you will. So, even before maybe the systems were in place, I mean, that attitude of customer service was in place. Have you seen the fruit? Like, what are examples, if you have one of or two, of where a customer has come back and given a compliment to it? You know what I mean? Do you get to see the fruit? Like, how do you sort of measure the fruit, or are there some anecdotal stories you can to how it has affected the customer ultimately? Because it's so clear from your story how focused you are on treating your people well. Any stories about the customer impact?
First of all, from customer on stage just a month ago, I'm talking about being a customer-centric business, right?
Yeah.
And I believe in that wholeheartedly. And what a lot of what we'll do along this lines is we'll bring in some of our largest customers, people from AMC or Regal or whichever one of the large customers that are out there. We'll bring them in and do an innovation day, and we'll have them into our plant and we'll host them for that day to talk about all the different things that we do, but we care for them while they're there, right? Spend time with them. We'll go to dinner with them. If they'll allow that, we'll have them back in for lunch the next day. We'll fine tune our presentation and the products that we're showing them for innovation to their location so they know that we're out there understanding their business, not just giving a broad brushstroke to the entire business. And we're customizing it to them. I'm really fortunate. I'm surrounded by a lot of really good people, but I will tell you, it's not uncommon throughout the year for me to hear from customers just how good of an organization we are at doing that. I think behind me, you might even be able to see some of the awards over the last 3-4 years. We've been awarded Vendor of the Year on some of the largest customers out there.
Wow.
And it's because our people care about what's going on in their organization and are out there understanding it and trying to develop products and programs that suit them best.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's a testament to.
It is, and it's that personal touch, right? It's being out there in front of them, having those conversations, understanding their business, shaking their hand, finding out what we can do to be a better organization. What is it that you need? How do we work together to collaborate to bring you the right things for your locations? And again, we're really fortunate. We've got some of the world's largest organizations out there are customers for us. If you rattled down the list, we're fortunate enough to be doing business with just about each and every one of them. And you have to get out there and you got to, shake hands and understand what their business is like and then grow from that.
And can you speak to, it seems to me a theme that I hear having conversations with people like you that are really intentional about leading cultures like this is I keep hearing this theme about what I call a virtuous cycle.
Right.
Like you're not doing this just to, I mean, you can't really put a price on the way you treat people. You know what I mean? Like you're motivated by your faith. You're going to treat people like gold. You're taking care of them because they'll take care of the customer. Okay, well, how does that translate into I mean, but then your retention's better. Okay, people's job satisfaction is better. They come to work kind of filled up, so that sort of their sort of joy, I hope, at work overflows to the customer. They kind of overserve, and then the profits get better. Okay, how would you describe that kind of virtuous cycle? Has it actually helped the profits of the business as well?
Absolutely. When you think about an organization like ours, first of all, we're a strategic, right? So we want to buy and then build long term. I'm not looking to buy and sell organizations. I'm looking to buy and build and grow. And the way that you buy and build and grow is by taking care of those customers long term. One of the things that people ask me all the time, what's that next thing that you want to buy and what are you looking for, right? And so when I'm looking at companies that I want to buy that might fit in with our organization, I'm looking at companies that are sold and things that are done within the customers that we do business with.
Yeah.
When I buy it, like a Dippin' Dots that we bought about 2.5 years ago, when I buy it, I can then bring to our customers this new product, and I shorten that selling window of being able to grow the business, right? And you're only able to do that if you've built up good relationships with those customers along the way. And that's that cycle you're talking about. So you take care of customer A, and when you have a chance to sell customer A, your third and fourth and fifth product, and you continue to grow that way, that's where that cycle really pays off. And then on the that's the top side. That's that's growing sales. Then on the bottom side, as you continue to have people who kind of bleed cherry red or bleed J&J blue, right?
Right.
Who that are able to and willing to work that extra hour, that extra time to make sure that the customer's satisfied, to make sure our plant is running appropriately, to get the next machine serviced, even though it's a Saturday night. As you do that, your bottom line grows with that.
Well, I just this is so much fun to hear your story because the dots just all connect cleanly for me. I think they will for everybody listening, about just kind of your humble beginnings, but the way you've grown this. And I think there's a temptation, uh, even for me, in many of us listening to this, yeah, maybe it's just too hard. How do you do it? You know what I mean? Like it seems complicated. Like how do you build a culture and a system to do this? And so I think if you're able to do it with 4,500 employees, there are some simple things you can do to kind of get started. And of course, that's Dan, where we always try to kind of take this at the end of the podcast, is just, some practical tips. So somebody's listening to this, walking the dog or what, riding in the car, and they're like, I want to use my platform, my business platform that I lead, to be more generous to people, just in general, like, how do I, love people better in the business?
Right.
What's just maybe one practical step or a first step they could take in the right direction?
Well, God calls us to be generous, right?
Yeah.
So I love having the opportunity to help grow the kingdom of God, and if God has put me in a place like this, to be able to have an influence in some small way through the actions and the way that we care for people, then I feel really blessed by that. And I've been fortunate enough to have a great group that I've surrounded myself with that have a lot of those same moral and generous feelings, right? And so if I were giving advice to anybody about, especially a small business and how you get started, care for those people, right? Stop. We get so busy throughout the day, and I have to remind myself of this. So this is me giving myself my own
No, I
advice.
understand.
Right? You get really busy throughout the day, and you have these opportunities to stop and care for people all throughout the day that pop up, and often you're just too busy to stop and
Yeah, you
say
blow by them. I blow by them.
Yeah, I do that all the time, and I catch myself.
Yeah.
If there's anything that I've tried to learn over the years, is to stop and do that, and that pays off in such strong ways. I have people that have been working here for 40 plus years that we can talk about stories about what happened 20 years ago, right? And I remember that time that you stopped and talked to me, and it was so impactful. So number one, I'd care for people in any way that you can. We started a J&J Cares program that put chaplains in half of our plants that now roam the plant once a month, just talking to people and showing them that we care for them. So care for people, make sure you get the pay structure right, so that,
Right.
That you got that behind you. Care for people, build a strategy. Right. It doesn't take all that hard. You can build your own strategy. Where do you want to be in over the next year? I always say strategies are dynamic. They change from year to year. You might have a 5-year plan, but every year you got to look at it and figure out where the priority is. And then I really am a big proponent of building a principles in which you want to live by. Right. And then rewarding those principles and making sure that you're having conversations around those principles. Many of these things I learned from groups of other CEOs that I might get together with that have some of even the same faith belief that I do in public companies, that will talk about what's best practices. And so learn from others, right?
Yeah.
What are you doing? How can I do this practically in my own business?
I love it. And it really, I think it starts with where you started, with a bunch of practical tips in there, but it starts with, I think, the mindset.
It does.
Of building in time and energy for the investment.
Exactly.
I mean, I know I'm guilty of, I literally have to think about maybe coming in even 5 minutes early before the first meeting so that I have a little time, and I generally mess it up. I'm blowing in 30 seconds before, and I don't really have time for a meaningful interaction where, you know what I mean? Like the mindset.
I do. And in the world we live in today, depending on the size of the company, it's instant. You're getting texts, you're getting emails, you're getting phone calls. People expect you to be on a linked, a Zoom, a Teams call every half an hour. And so it takes intention to make sure that you're stopping and looking around you for those people. Hey, we are all going through a trial. We're either beginning, we're in the middle, or at the end of a trial. Somewhere in our lives, we're all going through that. And nothing is more impactful to you when somebody comes alongside you and says, how you doing? What can I do for you?
That's the truth.
How are things going? right?
Yeah.
And so it starts for caring for people. That's where I would start.
Yeah. As one of the Chick-fil-A guys told me one time, he said, he goes, you know how somebody needs encouragement? He goes, they're breathing. Okay. So everybody needs it. We got to take time for it. Well, anyway, Dan, can't thank you enough for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure to be here with you, and it's a pleasure to have a chance to speak to your audience too. So thank you for having me.
Well, it's been a lot of fun, and thanks everybody for tuning in to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. Share it with a friend, subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.